Welcome to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners grow both their wealth and business on their own terms. Here's your host, Grant Bledsoe.
Hello, everybody. Grant Bledsoe here. Welcome back to Grow Money Business. This week on the podcast, my guest is Amir Tarighat. Amir is the founder and CEO of a cybersecurity company called Agency. He has been in this industry, cybersecurity that is, for some time. He has a very strong technical and educational background and joined me today to talk about why cybersecurity is so important and what we can do about it. This was really enlightening from my perspective. I know some of this because we have to be very safe in our business operations, obviously, being in the financial planning world. But Amir was very, very helpful and answered a lot of questions that I had and provided a lot of great and easy ways that we can stay safe online. Amir also broke some really exciting news for he and his colleagues at his company Agency. I won't spoil it here in the intro. You'll have to listen to it to hear about it. But it's very exciting for he and his colleagues at Agency. I hope you enjoy the discussion as much as I did. Hey, everybody. Real quick before we jump into today's episode, I have been advised by my attorneys to remind you all that none of what you might hear in today or any other episode of Grow Money Business is financial, investing, tax, legal, fitness, or even relationship advice. It's content that you're free to use and deploy on your own terms. And before you take any actions on what we might cover in the show, I really encourage you to consult with your accountant, attorney, or financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner and think that you might need one, be sure to check out threeoakswealth.com to learn more about my firm's planning, advice, and investment services. And we're live. I am here with Amir Tarighat. Amir, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Grant. Excited to be here.
This is take number 2.5, I guess. We had a riveting conversation about cybersecurity for about 12 or 15 minutes, and then ran into some technical difficulties and lost the file. So now we have a little bit of rehearsal. That just means that this round will be that much better for our listeners, I hope.
Awesome. Yeah, I could talk about this all day.
So I'm really thankful for you to be willing to spend your time coming on sharing some of your wisdom about this stuff, because cybersecurity is something that's pervasive to everybody across all walks of life, regardless of what you do or what your background is these days, because we run so much of our lives through our phones and through our computers. As you know, this is a podcast that helps business owners align and really marry what they're doing in their businesses with their personal lives, and helps them grow and capitalize on the equity that they build in their business and use that for they and their family's benefit longer term. And cybersecurity is a very, very big part of all of this stuff. So can you share a little bit about your background, what you do now? You run a company called Agency that helps individuals and businesses with these issues. How did you get into the field? What's your background look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background's in computer science. I'm a developer. Pretty much my entire career since I started over 10 years ago has been in regulated industries like finance, healthcare, and pharma. And I worked both on the side of cybersecurity that deals with writing secure code and making sure applications are built from the ground up in a safe way, but also with organizational security, which deals with the security of an operation, of an organization, such as the employees, their access to email, their devices, the network, that sort of thing. And so created Agency about 2 years ago to help individuals and small and medium-sized businesses get the same level of access to enterprise security, which is more than just software. It's also the management and the people that are actually working on keeping the organization secure every day, and planning and recovering as well.
Gotcha. And I know you have a very strong educational background too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Harvard, and I did a graduate program in advanced computer security at Stanford.
Wonderful. So with all that, and I find the way that you described your experience really interesting, because you spent some time doing the coding of software, making sure that was secure, and applications and device organizational security as well, which is, I'm sure, a helpful overlay as you run your current company. What does the landscape of cybersecurity look like today as we sit here?
Yeah, so the big trend is that as more businesses have transitioned from on-premises to cloud-based service providers and running most of their applications through SaaS that's hosted by someone else, um, the burden of securing the infrastructure has shifted to those service providers. So, if your applications are hosted at Amazon, or your email is hosted by Gmail or Microsoft, and all the applications that you use, whether it's you're an accountant and you're using QuickBooks Online, or whatever it is, those are the infrastructure for those things are being handled by the company that you're buying your SaaS from. What's left for you as an organization to worry about, and is your biggest threat surface, is the access to those applications, and that can be everything from your employees' personal cell phones accessing email, to the workstations that you're using, to the contractors and vendors that you're working with. I would say the other kind of major trend that's related to all this is that as these cyber risks have gone up for business owners and companies, um, the way that insurance relates to security has really shifted as well. And that is that to get a cyber insurance policy, whether it's like technical E&O or technical liability insurance, because the insurance companies had to pay out so many claims over the last year or two, they're now putting requirements for companies before they get the insurance. So that means they want to know, to get a quote, what security software are you using? Who's responsible for doing certain things? Is there forensic logging in case something happens? Just to get a quote.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing you saying is that in years past, all the applications and computer stuff that businesses would use often would fall on their own servers. Now we're paying other companies to do that for us, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, whatever, meaning that the vulnerability is the way that we access those programs. Where are the specific vulnerabilities there? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the number of vulnerabilities are endless and actually changing every day. But what it looks like is that every single person who interacts with your company, whether they're employees, interns, vendors, customers, for a bank, if you're a bank, you're thinking about, like, how are your customers even interacting with your systems? But all these people that are connected to your applications, who hold customer data, who work on things that are sensitive or have access to these sensitive applications, there's any number of attacks. It could be anything from malware that's installed on a smartphone or a laptop, to network-based attacks that might come through the Wi-Fi connection that the device is connected to. It could be a piece of software that gets installed on your phone that might be, a free horoscope app that's actually stealing data from the rest of the stuff that's going on your phone. We've seen all of that. Actually, we see that stuff almost every day at agency. And so, the example that I give, and really, drives home the point of why this is so important. Everyone's heard of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident that happened a few months ago, that shut down the oil pipeline to half the country and resulted in one of the historically largest ransomware payments. That was actually an attack on an individual employee of the company. The attackers didn't even know that the employee worked at Colonial Pipeline. They compromised the person in his personal life, and this was reported by Bloomberg about a month after the incident. The person happened to use the same password in his personal life to access the company VPN. The attackers tried it, gained access to the company's networks, and deployed ransomware. And so, even on that large scale, large organizations, the problem is still kind of the people involved in the company are the biggest threat surface. And attackers aren't going after, like, the big sophisticated companies. They're going after the low hanging fruit. They're going after small businesses. It's much easier and cheap. Attackers, these criminals, they operate just like businesses. it's easier and more profitable to go after easy targets than to go after really big targets.
Sure. So in that specific example, how was that password obtained that was being used in multiple places?
Yeah, so no one actually knows the exact details, publicly, but there's a couple of ways that happens. One of the things that we do at agency to prevent that sort of thing is dark web monitoring, which sounds simple enough. You're scanning the web to see if, hey, is there a record related to Amir's email address popping up somewhere in a list with his password, right? Because if my password anywhere gets compromised, whether it's my email or my bank account or my Twitter profile or whatever it is, the likelihood of being able to compromise other accounts significantly goes up. Whether I've reused that password, whether it's gaining control of one account to gain control of the next one. So many leading companies, and something that we provide included with agency, is that we scan everyone's email addresses and logins constantly 24 hours a day for breaches on the dark web, and then notify people as soon as that's detected so they can take action. So likely that's what happened at Colonial Pipeline. An email was compromised somewhere. There's other ways that it could happen. It could happen through malware that's installed on a device. It could happen by using a website that's insecure, and just filling out an account for something that happened to be malware.
Interesting. So there are tons of ways that this can happen, and the fact that we use that all the stuff we're doing is routed in our phones that we carry around in our pockets is probably the nexus of all these issues, right?
That's right. And I mean, if you look at some of these examples of like the fake websites that are designed to the phishing websites that are designed to steal your password, look like a fake bank login or PayPal or Gmail login or Facebook login. It's hard to detect on your computer. It's almost impossible to detect on your smartphone because you can't even see the URL at the top of your screen when you're using the browser on your phone. It's much more difficult to detect that kind of stuff, and attackers understand that. A lot of these attacks are now designed specifically to work on smartphones, and they kind of ignore computers altogether.
So can you, just to make sure that that all our listeners are understanding what we're talking about with these various threats, could you give us the way you describe malware and phishing and ransomware and all these different? I mean, we're kind of talking about the threats and vulnerabilities. What does that
Yeah,
actually mean to a business if one of these things happens?
yeah, absolutely. So, malware is a generic term that just means software that gets installed on a device. So that could happen on your smartphone, it could happen on your computer, it could happen on your tablet. Malware does lots of different things. It could be designed to steal your information. It could be designed to deploy ransomware, which is it locks up your computer until you pay the attackers money to unlock it. It could be designed to just scam you. I mean, there's plenty of malware that just starts showing pop-ups on your computer that, hey, this computer is got a virus on it. You need to pay money to get it fixed, and really, it's just a file you need to delete. So there's all kinds of malware. Phishing refers to the idea of a social engineering attack, which means that it's designed to trick you into thinking that it is someone you know or some entity that you trust. That can happen through the web with a fake website that looks like it's your bank's. It could happen through email where it looks like it's an email coming from someone that you know or you work with or a vendor that you use and tries to get you to do something like wire money to someone or install some piece of software or log into a website. It could also happen on your smartphone. It's very common now to get SMS based, phishing attacks that say things like, "Hey, there's a package that's being delivered to you," and pretend that it's FedEx. And once you click it, it will deploy some kind of malware or some other threat to your computer. Um, Ransomware is the big one that people talk about in the media because it's relatively new and has these big payouts. But for most businesses, The most common threat vector as far as like money being stolen is what's referred to as business email compromise, which is about a $30 billion a year attack vector. So this is everything from getting emailed, something that says, "Hey, click here to wire money," or to change wiring instructions, or pretending to be a vendor, and encompasses all those different kind of like phishing and software-based attacks.
I can tell you that personally here at our firm, I get dozens of phishing attempts every week, and they're often pretty easy to identify. Sometimes they're not quite as easy, and we go through a lot of training, and we have a lot of systems in place to ensure security here. Being a financial company, right? Very, very important. But the number of attempts that come through is staggering from my perspective. So it sounds like the phishing and is one of the primary ways that somebody's going to try to install malware and kind of lead toward that chain of a bigger payout from the perspective of a bad actor. If you get down that chain and you're in a situation where somebody is demanding a ransom to return access to your computer system or whatever, what do you do in that case? Are there any success stories here, or is it always bad news?
Um, no, there's definitely success stories, but that's the question, right? Like, if you're thinking about this for the first time at that point, you're kind of screwed. To
Mm-hmm.
be quite honest, if like the first time that you're thinking about like how to recover from a ransomware attack is after you have ransomware deployed, that's you're not in good shape there. But you know, you said it right. Like we all have tons of attacks on us every day, like as businesses. Everybody does. We have to be right every time. The attackers just have to be right once for something bad to happen, and that's kind of where this like vigilance and planning comes from. Um, I often start when I talk to people and start with like, have you ever been compromised before? And often, some people will say, no, we haven't. And my question will be like, how do you know that? How do you know you've never been compromised? A lot of these attacks last for months and years before something's happened where like money's stolen from you or your computer just shut off and doesn't work anymore. But the answer is that uh, that's what the real security is. The real security isn't just the prevention. The real security is having a plan of here's what we're going to do when this sort of incident happens to limit the damage and to recover from it as fast as possible. Limit the damage to the clients and limit the interruption to the business. In the last 12 months, agency has dealt with 2 ransomware incidents for our clients. We've dealt with several stolen online accounts that were ransomed that we've recovered. Tons of malware and phishing incidents. But the idea is that our customers have never had any costs related to those incidents. We were able to recover it for them entirely at no cost to them. And that's kind of the idea. If you have the security in place, you can fix it. So, like, thinking about ransomware, if you have proper backup set up, if you have proper security in place, everything that's stored is encrypted. If they steal it, there's almost nothing they can do because you can just hit reset on it immediately, recover from the backups. What they stole is encrypted. The keys to that encryption are properly, hidden so they can't get them. And you've got minimum damage. It's these companies that have done nothing to prepare that are, get hit with these hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses. And it's not, the expenses aren't just the, what the attacker wants you to pay them. The expenses are the legal fees for recovery, the remediation expenses that you have to pay third parties to go through and like forensically recover from all these technical things. That's where it gets expensive. And then not to mention the interruption to your business.
And fallout from your customer base too, potentially.
Oh, absolutely. The long-term implications are, especially if you're in like a regulated industry, like
Yeah.
lawyer, accountant, doctor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So, $1 million question is, what steps do we take to stay safe online, both as an individual and as the business?
I think the kind of most important advice I can give people, and it's more philosophical, is that understand that these third parties that you use, your bank, your software providers, your vendors, are not actually responsible for your security. They are protecting their systems and their data, and they're going to make decisions that benefit their organization as a whole. Your security, your organization's security, your team's security is your responsibility. No one else is doing it for you. You can't rely on, your Apple phone to be secure. You can't rely on, the apps that you're using to do it all for you. So if you start from a place where you have that mindset, you'll start to make decisions that are more secure for your organization. I'm talking about how you deal with handing out email addresses, how you deal with passwords, how you share access to accounts, how you create policies around how are we going to work with client data? Are we going to have our clients email us these sort of things? Are we going to email each other documents like this? Are our employees going to access these documents and applications from secure places like, what internet are they using? When they work, what devices are they using? So once you kind of take that perspective, the next step is thinking about what countermeasures you want to have. There's some basic stuff that kind of every business needs to have, and that's around endpoint security. That's software that protects the devices that are being used. Network level security, making sure that there's privacy enabled for all the devices and that sort of thing. And then I would say the third part of it, which is definitely the most important, is who's going to be responsible for recovery? Like, is there a service provider? Is there a company? Like, what's the first thing you're going to do when there's an attack? Is there insurance in place? What is the insurance going to cover? Who's going to take command of this incident and kind of like recover as quickly as possible?
Sure, sure. So having a more formal data security plan in place is what you're getting after, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're not at the stage where you think you need an entire plan, and maybe if you're like a 10, 20 person company, maybe you don't need as complete a plan, but somebody still has to be responsible for it, that knows they're responsible.
Right, right. So let's talk about some of the ground level stuff that we can do. And you mentioned network security versus individual security. Really common thing. We have this policy here. If you're doing work stuff, it has to be on the company VPN. Could you describe what a VPN is, a virtual private network, and what the benefit of that is? Because
Yeah,
I,
so
I
this
can't
is
articulate. I just know it's good
Yeah,
practice.
sure. Sure. So this is a touchy subject because the reason why people think VPNs are useful is actually not the real reason they're useful. But what a VPN is it takes a device and adds it to a virtual network, just like you would have in a office environment where computers are physically networked together, wired together through the Ethernet uh, port, and allows them to connect to things like applications or services or servers that they wouldn't be able to connect to otherwise. So you don't want just anyone to show up to the company's internal website. You have to be on this VPN to even be able to log in, and it's an additional kind of like moat to secure the devices. What often people talk about and think about VPNs is this idea of like encryption and privacy. And that's actually not the main use case for VPNs. The idea that like, okay, you're on a VPN and now it's encrypted. And the truth is that like what you hear about is like HTTPS or SSL, the lock symbol you see in your browser when you go to a website that starts in HTTPS. That's actually encrypting your connection. Pretty much every website nowadays has that. That's actually an encrypted connection between you and that website and no one else. VPNs just move the point of encryption to some server which is controlled by somebody else. You're actually trusting somebody else to unencrypt and encrypt and send that out. So, in a way, you're moving kind of like where the encryption is happening, but you're also exposing yourself to another person. So that's not the reason that people should use VPNs. At the same time, VPNs are not a cure-all at all. So like in the example you gave, many companies will say, hey, you got to connect to the VPN when you're doing work. And like the thing is, like that doesn't necessarily stop attacks. It's not like a cure-all. It's really a single point of failure if you think about it. The example with the Colonial Pipeline attack, like once you're compromised separately, like I've taken control of your device, you connecting your device to the VPN willingly or unwillingly now puts me in touch with all those things that you don't want to touch your network.
Right, right. And to be totally clear for our clients out there listening, that's not the only thing. We have we are required by regulators to have a more robust policy and all that. That's one portion of it, of course.
Course.
How effective are these password managers, where you have one master password that you use only to get into that manager, and then if you're going to create I don't know, a new email or account with like Salesforce or another cloud-based service, that generator is going to produce some random string of letters and numbers and symbols and everything, and it will only be used for that service. How effective is that
Very
today?
effective, and they're excellent, and everyone should use one. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is that it's only useful if you use it the right way. So I've seen, and people laugh because I've seen how people use it. I've seen people use it to just input their passwords for them so they don't have to type them, and they use unsecure passwords, and that is probably worse than not using it at all.
Right.
You want to get a good password manager, one that you pay for. Don't use free software for this kind of thing, and use it to actually generate unique passwords for every single account that you use, and maintain them and change them. And that is extremely effective. It's very important. Alongside password managers, the other thing that you want to do, which is equally important, is two-factor authentication, which is the using a second thing. Often that second thing is SMS. You don't want to do that. SMS is actually less secure than not using two-factor at all. It's counterintuitive, but that's often how a lot of attacks happen, is when you enable SMS two-factor authentication. But you want to connect it. You want to use a third-party app like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. They're free. And then use that kind of like security token. Some people might remember a long time ago, a lot of banks used to give out these RSA tokens that would like generate a 6-digit code to log in. It's basically that, but on an app, and you can use it on every single website that you use.
Interesting. So you can, even if the website itself is not offering that, you can use Google's platform for free to add two-factor authentication.
You can't add it to sites that don't support it, but pretty much every site supports it. They don't turn it on by default, but every email service, every social media network, every bank does offer two-factor authentication that you can think of.
Interesting. Okay. That's helpful. What paid password managers do you recommend?
My favorite password manager is 1Password. Agency actually has a partnership with them. We include a 1Password subscription for all of our users. The other one that I like is LastPass, and they're both very affordable, cost a couple of bucks a month.
I use LastPass personally. I think it's like $50 a year or something like that, and it's been really sound based on what people have told me.
Yeah, it's great, and they both have mobile applications that you can use, as well as like browser plugins.
Gotcha. So at this point, what I'm taking away is that the cyber vulnerabilities that we should probably focus our thought and effort on are more points of access: password management, VPN, generating random passwords, and two-factor authentication are probably the three most important things. Is it a fair takeaway?
Those are the most important things around like policies and like implementing like a strategy around like what your team does. I would say, every device needs to have some kind of endpoint security, or, you might refer to that as antivirus. Every device should have some kind of device management and antivirus set up on it, whether it's mobile phones, whether they're personal devices of employees that are using them for work, or company owned devices. That's a low hanging fruit. You just buy that and install it. It's not going to be enough to protect you from everything. It's a very elementary step, but you need that first.
That leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you was, how concerned do we need to be about the apps we download on our phones and the potential for that app grabbing information and sharing data and all the stuff we generally don't want? Will an antivirus program downloaded on your phone meant to protect it catch everything? Does this mean that we need to read all the terms and services of every app that we download that I think 0.01% of the population does?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because, like, how do you balance, living your digital life and being careful? I mean, like, how much, is safeguarding just paranoia? And the answer is, like, it's something that it is a risk. Not everything that's on the App Store is safe. It's not even about like their intentions are bad. There's plenty of apps that have insecurities because the way applications are made, just really quickly, is that everything is built on multiple libraries of different technologies. Like that's how all software is made everywhere. And so an app developer might have great intentions, but they're using some third party tool for advertising or analytics or some other thing they plugged into their software, which is compromised or becomes compromised at some point in the future. And then now your data is at risk. Like, you look at like these big things that make it to the news. Like just a couple of weeks ago, Log4j was, and this is probably boring to your listeners, but like Log4j was this huge software vulnerability that impacted like half the internet. And Log4j is this like logging software that's open source that a ton of websites use to log access to their website, and that became compromised. Nobody using Log4j has bad intentions, and this is something that lots of people are using. So this is how it happens. You do want something to protect you. It's not going to be like the end all kind of like solution, no matter where it's coming from. You still have to worry about what are you going to do when you get compromised. But I don't install just every app that pops into my feed. Like, oh, this looks cool, I'll download it. I stop and think about what it is. Like I look and see like, how long has this been on the App Store? How many downloads does it have? Like, what are the reviews? Is it made by like a reputable organization? Like, a lot of these vulnerabilities and things happen with kind of like the cheap, free apps that are doing stuff like telling you the weather, or people aren't making software for free. There's a reason they're getting you to install this stuff. Whether it's collecting data about you to resell or something else.
Right. Yeah, and probably safe to say along those same lines that for the stuff that you do have on your phone, you probably want to update them in a timely manner, right, as those vulnerabilities are uncovered over time.
Absolutely. Like the one kind of simple tip that I give everyone is that you need to keep all of your devices up to date. That goes for your phones, for your laptops, tablets, latest version of the operating system at all times. Often these updates are happening because there's a major vulnerability that's detected that's impacting a lot of people, and they push a change to that. And that's kind of like that's just as important as having, say, antivirus on your device, is keeping it up to date. I see sometimes people come to us like they haven't updated their computer for like a year or two, and it's like you're at the highest risk of being attacked if you've got like a year or two old operating system that hasn't been updated. That is really dangerous.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about agency. How
Yes.
if you've had it, you went through a rebrand recently, I understand. What is the solution like? Who do you work with? How does it all fit together?
Yeah, and I have kind of some big news. We just started. We were accepted into Y Combinator's Winter 22 batch. So
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, agency is now backed by Y Combinator.
Can you just
uh,
describe to our listeners what that is for those who've not heard of Y Combinator?
yeah, Y Combinator is probably the foremost startup accelerator in the world. They're based in Silicon Valley. They take early stage companies, sometimes just at the idea stage, sometimes like agency a year or two after they're kind of just getting launched, and they do a program twice a year, the last 3 months, where they basically accelerate the growth of the company through sales, marketing, investments. And a lot of companies you've heard about were launched out of Y Combinator. The really famous ones are Airbnb, DoorDash, Dropbox, Coinbase, and many, many others started out of Y Combinator.
Right on. How many in the cohort every 6 months?
So it's about 300 companies uh, each cohort.
Very cool. Well, congratulations. That's a big win for you and the company. But I cut you
Thank
off.
you.
Tell us where
Yeah,
what the company looks like.
yeah. So agency is a subscription based business. We have very transparent pricing. It starts at $20 a month per person, and that includes three things. It includes software that goes on devices, so iPhone, Android, Windows, Mac. It's all the software someone would need. So it includes endpoint security, device management, operating level system security, network level security. You won't need anything else. The second piece is 24/7 monitoring and response. And this is the most important part of it that makes it real security. Um, we are basically ADT for cybersecurity. When something happens, we're the first responders. So that's why we're able to kind of recover the examples I gave you earlier for our users. And the final piece of it is that each individual user gets personally over $1 million of coverage that are backed by two major insurance companies that vetted our system. So this covers loss of use, loss of income, repair, remediation, recovery, ransoms for those individuals who have it installed on their computer. So an example for that would be you're a personal, individual user who buys this for you and your family. You have something that happens, you'll get a reimbursement in addition to the recovery. In a business environment, your employees are using personal devices to do work. Let's say something happens and your employee's device gets bricked. Bricked meaning that the device is totaled. It's not usable anymore. It has to be replaced, which does happen. Your insurance policy for your company potentially may cover that incident for company owned devices. They don't, and that's a maybe. If you have good insurance, it will. If it isn't covered, if you don't have that, you definitely don't have coverage for the personally owned devices. So, who's going to cover that? Who's going to replace your employee's device that got attacked, kind of because of working with your company? So we'll replace that. So the individual gets that coverage, not the business. That coverage is provided for all the individuals at your company. And each of our members get personal coverage for up to $1 million for anything that happens while they have our service. And so we sell our product three different ways. We sell it directly to individuals. We sell it to small and medium-sized businesses as generally the only security solution they need. We also sell it to large organizations as part of their employer benefits programs.
Right on. Big market for it, I suspect. What are your? I suspect the vision might change a little bit as you go through the Y Combinator process. What is the vision for the company right now?
The vision right now is focused around small and medium sized businesses as our kind of go to market strategy. About 50% of our users right now come through businesses. So the business buys it for their organization and then they also provide it to their employees. I'd say the other half are individuals that buy it directly for themselves and their families or through like an employee benefits program. Um, Long term, maybe 10, 15 years from now, it'll be individual focused. But right now, we're primarily focused with small and medium sized businesses.
Right on. Well, what have we missed, Amir? Again, this has been this is not the typical stuff that we cover on the podcast. We talk about a lot about financial planning and investment and business management, business value and exit kind of stuff. And you're the first cybersecurity person we've had on. But this has really been an interesting conversation from my perspective. What have we left out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is the kind of thing where people get intimidated by it. It's scary. It's not fun to think about. And so often people just put it aside and don't think about it and think it's not going to happen to them. And the thing is, like, the mindset towards this stuff is changing. Part of the reason we called the company agency is that we want to give people agency. We want to give people control over their cybersecurity. And so, this is something that a little bit of thought will go a long way. Um, and just having a plan for yourself and your company will make you feel better about it. It'll help you. A lot of the companies that we deal with that do the best use security as a way to sell to their clients. They want to share with their customers and their partners, hey, we take security seriously. These are the things we're doing. And they have those kind of same expectations for the companies they work with.
That's well put. That is well put. I do have to throw in one semi-unrelated personal finance security tip that people often ask about before we conclude here, and that's the use of debit cards versus credit cards. Your debit card is tied directly to your bank account, and there are one source of insecurity out there is a lot of scammers, particularly in California, will rig gas station machines to obtain your credit card or debit card information, and they may even set up security cameras to capture your PIN. If somebody gets a hold of your debit card information and withdraws money out of your account, you ain't ever seen it again. That money is gone. But if you get in the habit of putting everything, all of your charges you possibly can on a credit card, it's almost like an extra layer of defense, because if there are fraudulent charges on there, the banks these days are by and large pretty good at identifying them and will basically take care of it for you before money leaves your account and you have to pay for it. So unrelated to our discussion today, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that component.
I think that's really good advice, and it is related to our discussion because at the end of the day, all these attacks boil down to stealing that money, and it is true. I actually had that happen to me at a gas station in California.
Oh
So
no!
it does really happen, but a lot of that stuff is moving online. So online, it's the same thing, like stealing your debit card or credit card, and a lot of people buy identity theft coverage for this reason. At the end of the day, it's the bank's responsibility to cover this stuff, but you actually have to be vigilant enough to catch it first.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, thank you again for spending some time with us, Amir. How can people get a hold of you? What's the website for agency so people can check out the services?
Yeah, it's getagency.com, getagency.com. And you can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Happy to share those links.
Right on. We'll include all that stuff in the show notes, so go check out Amir's company. Sincerely, I wish you the best of luck with the Y Combinator experience. I suspect that will be very helpful and super fun and interesting. So thanks again for being on, and best of luck with the trajectory of the company.
Thanks so much, Grant. I really enjoyed being here and talking with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners grow both their wealth and business on their own terms. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you digest podcasts to ensure you don't miss out on future episodes and announcements. And feel free to submit questions to growmoneybusiness.com.